Hello friends, I'm Michael Kingswood, and this is Story Time. It's Tuesday, it's 2025, so we are continuing with our Tuesday routine of sharing the next chapter in Glimmer Vale, the Glimmer Vale Chronicles #1. Glimmer Vale Chronicles is my heroic fantasy series that I've been writing for a long time now. Book number 7 just came out about a month and a half ago, and I'm sharing the first book here and on Substack and on the Arcaven Comics site because I love you guys and want you to be happy and enjoy good stories so that you will then go on and buy all the rest of the books. This is Chapter 4 this week. Chapter 4 is called Lyttelton. It's where they come into the town of Lyttelton. Clever chapter title. Anyway, I wrote it, but I'm not reading it. A great voice actor that I hired is reading it for me, and I hope you'll like it.
Chapter 4 Lyttelton. As they rode into Lyttelton, Julian was surprised to find the road paved. He had expected dirt streets, or at best cobblestones, but the main street into the town was paved with what looked like squares of flagstone. "How did this happen?" he asked Raedric. The other man shrugged. "There's a rock quarry a little ways up in the mountains east of here. Back before I first came here, some folks got the idea to use some of that rock to pave the streets. They only got the main street done before deciding it was too much effort, or something." Julian chuckled. But his humor faded quickly as he looked from the paving stones to the people in the town. A dozen, maybe 20 townsfolk were walking the main street as their horses began clopping down the road. One and all turned toward the sound of horses' hooves with expressions of dread. A woman nearby clutched her small child and pulled him close, as though unwilling to let him come near them. The weight of all those fearful eyes was nerve-wracking. "What gives? I thought you said these people were friendly." Raedric shook his head slowly. "I've no idea." Turning his gaze toward a young man, barely old enough to need a shave more than every other day, who had stopped in the street not far from them, he nodded in greeting and smiled. "Hello there. Can you point us toward the constable's office?" The young man blinked and for a moment looked as though he was going to bolt. But then he looked from Raedric's smile to the brigand trailing behind them and the rope tied around his neck, and he swallowed, then answered. 3 blocks down, then make a right. First building on the left." He paused for a moment, as though unsure of himself, then spoke again. "You're not with him, are you?" Gesturing toward the bound brigand, his voice sounding almost hopeful. Julian snorted. "Him?" Raedric replied. "He and a few others tried to rob us on the road here. We're taking him to the constable for justice. His friends weren't so lucky." The young man's eyes widened and a large grin spread across his face. Looking around, Julian could see the tension leave the other people on the street in a flood. As they spurred their horses forward and moved on down the street, the eyes continued to follow them, but the murmur of hushed discussion sprang up among the townsfolk as well. Julian caught the word heroes a few times. What was that all about? They found the constable's office right where the young man said it was, just off the main street, on a side street that was paved, if that was the right word for it, with assorted rocks and gravel. It was a small, functional place. Short stairs led to a porch and a wide set of double doors at the front of the building. A simple sign reading Constable hung over the door. "Looks like this is it," Raedric quipped as he dismounted and tied his horse off on a hitching post in front of the building. "You are a master of the obvious," Julian replied with a grin. He made quick work tying his horse off. Then he grabbed his baldric from around his saddle horn and, donning it, walked over to the brigand. "Time to face the music, friend," he said as he untied the knot around the brigand's neck. The rope dropped to the ground, and for a second Julian thought the brigand was going to try and make a run for it, no matter how exhausted and beaten down he was. But with his hands bound and the pair of them ready to chase him down, he wouldn't get far. Apparently he knew it, because his shoulders, already slumped from fatigue, drooped further and his gaze lowered to the ground, defeated. Julian grabbed him by the arm and pulled him toward the building. "Let's go!" Raedric led the way, swinging the doors open to allow Julian and the brigand to follow easily. Inside was a simple office. 2 desks, one on either side of the room facing each other, and a pair of benches on either side of the entrance were the only furnishings. Mounted on the wall behind one of the desks was a rack holding a small collection of swords. A similar rack holding several unstrung bows and an equal number of full quivers hung behind the other. A pair of lamps on wall mounts burned merrily, adding light to the room. A door made of iron bars was set in the wall directly across from the entrance. Julian could see a number of other similar barred doors in the corridor beyond. Holding cells, no doubt. A slender man of medium height, with a narrow face and unruly hair the color of hay, sat behind the desk on the left, reviewing a leather-bound ledger. He looked up at once, his eyes widening in surprise as they walked in. He collected himself quickly, closing the ledger and standing up to greet them. "Gentlemen, what can I do for you?" "You the constable?" Radric asked. The man shook his head. "I'm Deputy Fendig. Constable Mallory is off dealing with an issue right now." "Good enough. This man—" Julian pushed the brigand forward as Radric gestured toward him. "And several others tried to rob us on the road earlier today. We've brought him here for justice." Fendig did a double take and looked the brigand up and down. "Is that right?" he said quietly. There was a long silence as Julian and Radric looked at each other. Something very odd is going on, Julian thought. "That's right," Radric said slowly as he looked back at Fendig. "About an hour after noon on the road just above Silver Falls. He and 5 other—" "5?" "Yeah, 5, Julian replied. Fendig looked doubtful, but he nodded. "All right." Moving back over to his desk, he pulled open one of the drawers and removed a large iron ring hung with a number of keys. As he stepped past them and unlocked the door to the cell block, he said, "Bring him along." They followed Fendig into the cell block. Once inside, Julian saw it contained 8 cells, 4 on each side of the corridor. They were all unoccupied. Each cell had a pair of cots and a bucket, no doubt to use as a chamber pot. Narrow windows, too small for a man to squeeze through, let in light. It would be paltry even at noon, but now with dusk coming on, the light was virtually non-existent. Only a pair of lamps mounted at either end of the corridor provided illumination. Fendig led them to the last cell on the right and opened the door. It squeaked on its hinges, making Julian wonder how long ago it had been used last. "In here," Fendig said, gesturing towards the cell. Radric, who was bringing up the rear, stepped forward and pulled out his knife. A quick cut removed the rope that bound the brigand's hands. Then Julian shoved him forward. He stumbled into the cell and fell over onto a cot. For a moment, he just lay there. Then, he turned over and sat up. Rubbing at his wrist to help restore circulation, the man looked up at Fendig. "If I were you, I'd think hard about letting me go, deputy," he said. "I'm with Fossil." Fendig went pale, and he swallowed audibly. But his voice was steady when he spoke. "That'll be up to the constable," he said, and he shut the door and locked it. The brigand chuckled softly, a laugh of sadistic amusement. As Fendig walked back to the front office, Julian lingered for a moment to study the prisoner. He did not look half as defeated as he had outside, when he was in Julian and Radric's custody. Back in the front office, Fendig pulled out another ledger and dipped his quill into an inkwell on his desk. "I'll need your names and where you're staying in town. Who or what is Farzal?" Julian asked. Fendig paused, his quill poised over the paper. Then he sighed and looked up at the two of them. "A band of outlaws has been making trouble in these parts for the last month or so. From their look, they're mostly deserters from the army. Small wonder they turned to thieving, right? Men like that will do anything. Farzal's their leader." "You're afraid of them," Radric said, his tone flat with disapproval. "Of course not. He's all bluster, that's all." Even if his body language and expression hadn't screamed that he was lying, the speed of Fendig's reply made it plain as day. "Now then, as I said, I'll need your names and where you're staying in town. Constable Mallory will want to talk to you about this incident." "Does Molly Millens still run the Orlock down by the docks?" asked Radric. Fendig looked surprised again, but he nodded. "Yes, has been for years." "We'll be staying there, then." Radric and Julian gave their names, and Fendig thanked them and showed them out with promises that the constable would contact them first thing in the morning to take their statements. As the office doors swung shut behind them, Julian shook his head. 3-1 that guy releases our boy before dawn. I'm amazed he even locked him up. Probably wouldn't have if we weren't there. "I don't know," replied Radric. He looked as troubled as Julian felt. "Nothing we can do about it, though. Let's go get settled and warm up." It was hard to argue with that idea.
All right, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, hey, Kingswood, I love that story. How can I buy your books? Great question. Here's the answer. Best way to buy my books is to come over to my site, michaelkingswood.com/store. That will bring you to this place, which is my company's store where you can get books, merchandise, all kinds of great stuff that I've set up. And but you're wondering how it works. Well, here, let's check out Glimmer Chronicles, which is my heroic fantasy series that I've talked a lot about. If you haven't read it yet, you really should. It's a super fun series. Everything you would want. You should start with Glimmer Vale, which is the first book. Come over here to Glimmer Vale. It'll load up. Hey, look at that. You get the book description, links to other books in the series, great stuff. And you can pick the format you want. You got ebook, trade paperback, and audiobook. Not everything I've written is an audiobook yet, but almost everything's a trade paperback and everything's an ebook. But like, hey, I know what you're thinking. Hey, I'm buying from you. How do I get the ebook? There's a service that I work with called Book Funnel. When you buy from my site, they will send you a link. That link will lead you to a page where they will walk you through how to load your ebook onto the device you're choosing, or you can just download it to computer and do whatever you want with it. So that way it's easy peasy. Maximum profit for me, all kinds of fun for you. But I know a lot of you guys, you like your Kindles, you like your other things, and you want to go straight to the retailer, and that's fine. You can come over here to michaelkingswood.com/books2read, the number 2. And I have this handy dandy universal booklet aggregator page set up. You can scroll through, look at all my stories, all my books, and pick which one you want, and then go from there. Here's how it works. Let's do Glimmer Vale again. So Glimmer Vale, first book in the series, you click on it, you get this thing, you get the book description, you get all other books in the series, and you say, get it now. Okay, get it now. Look what happens. Every retailer where you can find it is here. You can pick the one that you like best and say, okay, cool. Well, let's say I wanted to buy it in, I don't know, let's just say Kobo, because why not? Click on it. And then it'll ask you, is this your favorite store? If so, you set it so every time you come back, you don't have to choose. It'll just go take you to your favorite store. But let's just, you don't have to do that. Well, we're going on to Kobo. Hoo-yah. Hey, look at this. Here it is on the Kobo site. People like it. People have bought it. Good stuff. Links to other things of mine. And, or you can do one of the other stores that you like. Either way, you get the book you like. I get money. It's all good. Either way you choose to do it is awesome. I thank you in advance for your readership, and I hope you enjoy it.